Hi, folks. Tristan here with an announcement before we start today's episode. You may have already seen this on our social media, but we have changed our name. After gathering some listener feedback, we found that the podcast was a little hard to find, and our name may not have represented us as well as we thought. We here at the Reading and Language Learning Center are speech-language pathologists, but the guests that we interview on the show come from everywhere. This is because our goal is to discuss treating the whole child, which takes a myriad of different clinicians and educators. And since we interview more than just SLPs, we decided to name our podcast More Than Words, with a subtitle of Treating the Whole Child. We hope this makes the podcast easier to find and to share with parents, educators, and other clinicians who you think will benefit from what we have to say here. So thank you so much for your feedback. It helps us out a lot. And please always feel free to leave us comments and reviews so that we know what you all want to hear from us. All of the same links will work to get to the podcast, and we haven't changed our social media. So you can still find us at Reading LL Center on Facebook and Instagram, the Reading and Language Learning Center on YouTube, as well as www.readingllcenter.com. We hope you enjoy the new name, and let's hop right into this episode. Welcome back to More Than Words, a podcast where we discuss treating the whole child. Today, we will be talking to Kristy Davies about AAC. How are you today, Kristy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. We're excited to have you here and excited to have you share what you do. So that's the first thing I'd love for you to do is tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Of course. Again, my name is Kristy Davies. I am a speech language pathologist, a AAC specialist. AAC stands for Augmentative Alternative Communication. So I work primarily my days with children or adolescents, sometimes adults, but mostly children who have a communication need strong enough that requires additional services outside of traditional speech therapy.
Okay. Awesome. So if people were looking to find your services or something like that, where would they find you, like physically in the world and then also online?
Oh, of course. So we have, it's actually super exciting. You're the first to know. I haven't put it out there yet. So we actually just moved into this very super big clinic space. So we're very excited. We're in Mt Laurel, New Jersey, which is in Burlington County next to Philly. Yes. So we are literally furnishing this very, very large space. So we're very, very excited.
That's awesome.
So we're in South Jersey and online we're speechlanguageassociates.com. And then that's our handle and all the social media, Speech Language Associates. It's an amazing mouthful. My husband always jokes, like, when are you going to abbreviate that? But at this point, it just kind of like rolls off the tongue.
Right.
So on Facebook and all the handles were Speech Language Associates.
Amazing. I'll have it linked in the show notes for people so they can find you guys.
Okay, perfect.
Amazing. Well, if you're ready to start chatting about AAC, I am too.
That sounds good.
Awesome. So you did this already, but remind us, what does AAC stand for?
Yeah, of course, because I do get some pretty funny or interesting acronyms that people believe it is. So AAC stands for Augmentative Alternative Communication. So basically those big words mean anything that augments or enhances, makes better, or anything that alternative, anything that changes what is expected or quote unquote the typical or the norm. So for AAC, that would mean that if you have, some speech, but maybe, I don't want to use the words not enough, but for some reason you're not able to participate fully, have a fulfilled life as it relates to communication, you need something to augment, you need something to enhance that. Alternative obviously could also mean if it's just not a viable option for you, then you need a different means to get your message across. So therefore, like you just sort of seeking alternative ways. So AAC could, that A and the other A can be either or both, depending on the circumstance.
Okay, cool. So when would you say using AAC is warranted? You kind of touched on that, but go a little deeper if you don't mind.
Yeah. This is a question I struggle with because it's a tricky question because I hate to answer a question with a question, but it's in my mind, and of course, obviously I'm biased as this is what I do every day, all day, is I kind of say like, well, when isn't it warranted? I think sometimes we don't even realize that we're using AAC, so myself as someone who's a signer, like I use and teach sign language as like just a little hobby thing that I do. And obviously now incorporating into, my career world, at my own kitchen table, like if my mouth is full, I'm signing napkin and my child is like handing me a napkin, like that's AAC, like my mouth, my speech is not available. I am communicating in another way. And, and I joke and say that, but it's needed whenever, again, there isn't fulfillment or feeling purpose within themselves with the means that is your God-given abilities. So it could be something that is congenitally based or acquired, it even could be acquired like just a minute after birth, or it could be acquired at any point in life. So it's really wherever there is some sort of need or delay in communication or speech that is significant enough that the person or the team around this person feels that they can't fulfill that with their own being, with their speech mechanism themselves.
Right. Okay. So I might be backtracking here, but can you give us some other examples? Because you started talking about sign language. Can you give us other examples of like AAC that you would like use?
Yeah. It's a huge field. And I think sometimes people get really confused of what it is and or isn't, or that it is maybe more narrow because it is so broad. AAC, they, not to get all technical and geeky, but they call it like aided or unaided. So like if it's unaided means that's my own person that like using sign language, asking for a napkin in sign language at dinner, or at a loud restaurant, that's unaided, like this on my person. This is something I can do. I can use my hands and I can sign napkin and someone understands me and they give me a napkin. That's a form of AAC. When people think AAC, they think like, the famous people, like that one show that I think is off the air now, but I think it was on like ABC. I can't even think of the name right now. Or like, Stephen Hawking's or things like that with this huge, elaborate, expensive technology, computer system of some sort, tablet, something like that. That's also AAC, but it fills the gamut in between those two things. It has its own very large spectrum rainbow, if you can use those sort of words. So it could be anything from just pen and paper to sign to a communication board to something battery operated to something like you have to plug in battery operated. It charges all the time. So it's very diverse of the different means that can be called AAC.
Okay. So going back to the actual human at hand, what can AAC do for like a child?
So I think this is really contingent on the child and their environment.
Of course.
And when I say environment, I think of like all the people in their environment. So as long as they have the right team, parents are our best cheerleaders, our best supporters or caregivers, whoever that team is, it can open any door, right? I mean, individuals with AAC, they're attending schools and colleges, just as you and I did, with our unaided, with our own speech mechanism without AAC. They're obtaining jobs, they're having fruitful relationships, they're getting married, and they are getting their own cars. And I think hopefully just with the types of technology there are now, that you can use AAC on your Apple Watch, you can use AAC on your Apple iPhone or your Android, or it doesn't have to be this huge clunky thing, this device that people are thinking of. I think it helps there be more diversity and acceptance in what it can or can't be, quote unquote. And so we're having children being able to really feel like they're creating bonds with friends, and they're answering questions and they're participating, and they're not just kind of getting Q&A, I called it, like question and answer. They're not just getting like drilled all day. Like they actually get to ask the questions now. And really, like, sky's the limit. As long as their team is with them and on their side, like they can do just about anything, that you and I can do. It might take them like a hot beat a little bit, a second more. We have to be patient.
Right.
Because no one can ever replicate how fast you and I are talking, right?
Right.
Like, technology can't do that. Outside of that, there's nothing, there's nothing that the AAC can't help them with, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And you had talked about kind of like the Apple Watch and talking about different technology. So since you said there are so many different device options, can you share a couple that are like low tech or low price or both?
Sure. So there's what they consider, like no tech, low tech, mid tech, high tech, again, kind of like a stepping gradual process there. So when you think of like low tech itself, that's when we would start with like communication boards or communication books. Maybe one of those like playground park signs that you see now that are getting a little trendy, which is really awesome to see, that people are sponsoring these and getting these big communication boards at playgrounds. And so that's what you think when you think low tech, something that you could almost Google image and you could pick up an image or use symbol sticks or some sort of image set and create something or adapt something that's already created. Low tech, again, could also be paper and pencil. I myself have dysphagia. So years ago when I had surgery, I couldn't talk. And so if they didn't know sign language, which obviously most of my circle doesn't, but some of them do, I had to use paper and pencil. Like that's still low tech, right? So, but low price, fortunately, just due to our climate and culture right now, like there are a lot of tablets that are lower price, not to say, an iPad's cheap, but in the grander scale, the scheme of AAC, like it is nice sometimes that you can get a tablet off of, Target or Best Buy shelf for a couple $100 or off of Facebook Marketplace or something, or some sort of holiday gift gifted down or regifted, that you can use some sort of tablet and modify it for means for AAC for a child. So that, a couple $100 can get costly, but on the grander scale of, several $1,000s for some of these systems that I have to recommend, it feels a little bit more affordable.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to hear. I want to go back to something you mentioned, the communication boards. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can
Yes.
you describe those? Maybe I know what you're talking about and I just can't think of it, but I want you to elaborate on it if you can.
Yeah, sure. So communication boards can literally just be a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper that you like laminated or cardstock or something. And there's, think of like a board, I'm making it up, like 5 by 5 little picture cells. And it could be different pictures on there, and they're touching the different cells, the different squares, and the pictures have a label on the top. And it says, they touch the different boxes, and it would say like, want, eat, and they're moving their finger to the different boxes and providing you this language communication in that way. Sometimes these higher tech systems, these very expensive apps or these very expensive communication systems come with these already printed on, legal or regular standard paper. So you can obviously adapt those as well. Some really other awesome things we do with these communication boards. I mentioned, you can get them immensely blown up. You might see them in your school systems, but, you can get these very large boards and put them on playgrounds. So that creates that connectedness where our children who need AAC can now be with peers who don't need AAC, and they can have that together. We use AAC in classes as a collective whole, and that even our non-AAC users are using it for a variety of reasons, as well as also just that peer, that buddy, that relationship piece, that acceptance where like, I'm going to help you, even if I'm not directly teaching and tutoring you at this moment or whatever, where we want to give that coaching. They're just showing acceptance. And I can use this just like you can use this. It's okay, right? It's just part of our world, just like if your child is deaf and you choose to learn sign language to bring him or her up, if your child needs AAC, you need to make a choice of I will or won't learn whatever AAC modality they're using, because if I don't know it, how can I teach it to them?
Right.
So that acceptance piece, the communication boards can really help with that, because clearly, you can't go around supplying everybody with an iPad or everybody with a communication system just to give acceptance.
Right.
That's not a viable financial option. But certainly we can, have boards around schools, hallways, or in bathrooms or in playgrounds and things like that. And you can get very creative with them. If you need like a more fall Halloween one versus a more core language one, or a little mix of both, so you could do different things. You can adapt them very well, or use them in a pool, laminate and put them in a soda bottle and they float like a little buoy, and there's someone I have, a little toddler AAC user who that was like our suggestion for the summer, was to put the laminate paper in the soda bottle and let it just float. And so she could just touch it and didn't worry about anything getting wet. Her iPad clearly wasn't making it into the pool. And she still could say like, feel happy or something in the pool. And when she didn't have her AAC traditional means with her.
Thank you for elaborating on that. That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is another interesting question, but can you share a little bit of a story from your experience on the success of a child using AAC?
Yes. These are obviously why we do what we do, right? Like no matter what, if it's AAC or wherever we are in our speech and or language therapy of what we do. The one I think of when I heard this question was, I call her Charlie Angel. And I did ask her mom, so I am allowed to use her name, Charlie. And she has Angelman syndrome, and she is just amazing. And I met her before she turned 2. Parents accepted it, embraced it right away, and just cheerleaded the fact that they wanted to do anything and everything for her. I came on board, and we started with some low tech. We tried some high tech, but we're talking a 20-month old, their little fingers can't do, what our fingers can do, whether it be in sign or touching something. There's no finger isolation at that age. And we had some very, very broad goals, like just kind of like, let's see if she could just kind of slap a communication book, page, her board, and looks for very basic things. Long story short, fast forward to not even a year, she graduated, if we can use that word. She moved on from her low tech. Mid tech was not even an option for her. She flew right through that.
Wow.
She moved on to a high tech iPad with a key guard, which is amazing. It's just a very mild, mid tech adaptation on these iPads. And not only that, but then within the system that she's using, she did so well that we were able to move her to like a very robust language enriched system.
Wow.
So right now, Charlie just turned 3 a little over a month ago.
Oh my gosh.
And she started preschool, and I had the ability to train her new preschool staff, saying like, here it is. And I got to show them on the screen, and they were a little familiar with her just from meeting her briefly. And I was like, and this is all the things she can do. Blah, blah, blah. And I just went off on this whole big list. That she can do this. She can ask you for her food. She's gonna greet you. She's gonna possibly tell you she has to go potty. Right. She's gonna, ask for her preferred toys. She's gonna tell you who she hung out with last night. She's gonna tell you your name. She's gonna, and I just come up with this huge list of things that she could do.
Yeah.
She wears it. She has this cute little leopard print harness that she wears, and she does it perfectly. This is the same little girl who couldn't even walk without her hand held, even 2 hands held when I first met her. So like leaps and bounds. I mean, AAC has given her more smiles. AAC has given her parents more smiles, right? Yeah. It's given her grandparents a feeling of connectedness to someone who they know she's not able to say their name. And now she uses her talker and she's saying, Papa or Mimi and my mom and grandma and all the other, she goes through them all, and it's purposeful. She's not just hitting things to hit things. She's telling us that she's hungry. She's telling us that she wants some water. She's going towards her device. She's using just amazing language. She's expanding her vocabulary. We always look at like language stages as speech language pathologists. We're always looking at like making sure we don't miss a beat about, communication and language stages and different vocabulary that they're supposed to do. And for someone with you know, a pretty substantial syndrome such as Angelman, she's showing the world that a label doesn't matter. She's
Right.
showing the world that like, I'm going to do this. And just earlier, I was talking about teams and who's around you, and her parents are, of course, her number one supporters, but like they have such, a warm heart that the team
Yeah.
that they are building around her feels it, so when you
Yeah.
all kind of have those same feelings, of course, we're always working for our clients and our students or whoever, whatever title we want to call them, but you just know that, you're making a difference in her life, and she's just growing in leaps and bounds. And it's great to watch. It's like 13 months, and the stuff to see her do is, to think a year ago, I was working with somebody who couldn't even like isolate a finger and was like slapping a piece of paper. It's crazy.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's exciting to know, like, I'm grateful that I'm still part of her journey.
Yeah.
They're very, very large in the Angelman Society, like FAST. They're very large into the whole group. And so like for her to be almost like one of, not the spokespersons for Angelman, but like for her to be this, this amazing light in Angelman syndrome and say, hey, look, like this little girl is able to do so much. Like your child can do that too. So it's super exciting.
Wow. That's incredibly inspiring as well. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Of course.
That just makes my heart happy.
Yes. Well, it makes my heart happy as well. I call her Charlie Angel whenever I'm talking about it. I'm like, Charlie Angel. I mean, I know it means Angelman syndrome, but I mean, seriously, when you see her and how happy she is, it's just like, oh, she's,
she is an angel.
One of the reasons why we do what we do.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And I hope that any SLPs that are listening and like anyone else that is thinking about working with AAC, that inspires them to really dig deep.
Yeah. Cause I think one of the issues that we have sometimes, is we can get accidentally narrow focused or think about all the things that Charlie couldn't do. I mean, at 20, 21 months, like I could list a lot of things that Charlie could not do, but I presumed competence. I presumed that there's a lot of things in this little girl that I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's not fair on her if I make these assumptions that like, well, because you can't walk independently, you're never going to be able to hold your device, you're never be able to transport or carry your device, or because you can't isolate your finger, we're not going to move forward with more words. We're going to limit your words and make you like hit like a Big Mac switch, when there's like big things you can almost buy on Amazon, it's a joke, that we have like you see all the memes and all the things on line now that like we're teaching our dogs and, me as well, like to hit these big switches, rightfully so. And not to say that they don't have their place in what we do as a speech language pathology group, but like to not limit her, she's just grown leaps and bounds globally, and her communication has, I think, surpassed where anybody thought she would be. And she just keeps going. Like, it's not like, okay, now we're like dead ending. No, like she's going places, she's putting two words together at 3 years old with someone with, some cognitive and language deficits. And she's already putting language together. It's amazing.
Yeah. I love to hear that. Well, not to hop off Charlie's story too quickly, but I do have one last kind of like big question for you, which is, have you found ways to incorporate AAC into teaching early literacy skills?
Yes. I think this is really important. And this has actually kind of a little bit kind of veered my direction in the past few years, that I'm going out of my way to learn more about literacy. Obviously, I have the standard speech language background as all other SLPs. I received my doctorate in AAC parent training. So that was a little bit more, narrow, isolated, but I realized literacy was the missing link. I truly realized that our children who are their teachers are asking us, we're going for AAC consultation, or we're coaching teachers and other people, and they're saying like, I can't test him to find, a F&P level, or I can't test this person to figure out like what they can or can't understand. And there's tons of very relevant, just genuine questions about like, I don't know what he or she actually knows versus what they're quote unquote copying or matching on their AAC system. And it made me really dive in deep. So I'm in the middle of tons of my own personal research as it relates to literacy and AAC. And there is some really great stuff out there right now anyway, with like Dr. Karen Erickson and others. But I think making sure that systems are set up correctly. One thing I find when I enter in a new system is that they might only have a graphic symbol and they don't even have a text orthographic label on that, little things like that. Just making sure that we're not accidentally already starting with puzzle pieces missing. When a child starts with an AAC system, like Charlie, I know she's 20 months and a symbol of text means nothing to her, but she still deserves that right to have that word ball on top of the picture of ball, something as simple as that. But we are incorporating reading much more now. We have some children who actually are fond of reading sight word books, or we're directly communicating with reading specialists that we work with in school districts to say well, if this child didn't have AAC, what would you be trying to teach him or her? And let me be the one to figure out how to adapt that and how to modify maybe their AAC system or modify how you're teaching it to support this. AAC, there's no, it's harder. I don't mean to say that it's not, but there's no reason why we still can't incorporate early literacy skills. When we're doing story times, we model and we show teachers how to use the AAC system right in midst of them in the middle of reading, right? Just like how, again, going back to, being deaf or sign language, you're going to have a teacher who's going to sign in the middle of doing, brown bear, what do you see? And they're going to move their hands while they're talking. I need to move my finger on my AAC system and hit some of those words, right? That's the same sort of thing. I'm enriching that child with their AAC system while I'm also doing these other things, and story read-alongs. Sometimes we use what we call cheat sheets or picture cues, the little symbols that add up. They call icon sequences, the little symbols that add up to be the word bear. We might put them on their papers. So they're reading in words, but they're also reading in symbols because that's what their device looks like. So you have to pair those things together, and then you teach to separate them out versus separating them out and teaching them separate. You put them together and then you weed them apart, and then teach that a little bit more isolated. So we are definitely doing our research right now as it relates to AAC, and more so how it relates to how the general public schools are already expecting it. If you're in a very private, specialized school, yes, they have different curriculums available and they have different supports available to them and are more familiar with AAC. But since we're doing so much support in public schools, it's those teachers who are I just don't know what to do with this student. And so we are trying our best. We're creating adapting different materials for them to make sure that child can be as much of a part of reading with their peers, so that they're not just quote unquote matching, a picture with a picture or something, that they're actually learning sounds and they're learning letters and how those letters go together. So it's a work in progress. I do not have the answer, but we're trying, we're plugging away. And I find that, since literacy is a part of everything that we do in school, you can't even solve a math problem anymore without literacy, right? So I think it's just super important to, after we're learning our AAC system and the language with that system, that we go right into literacy, because literacy only gets more complex. So that's been our goals recently with our children with AAC.
That's awesome and very cool to hear. And I would love, as you get more and more into that research, to hear more about it, because that's
for sure.
It makes sense as you hear it, right? To have the literacy go along with the kind of the AAC journey, but it is interesting that sometimes it isn't taught at the same time, the literacy components.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that was my last question for you, but if you have anything else you want to share or anything you want to say for parents or SLPs before we sign off, I'd love to hear it.
Not particularly, but I guess one thing I think of is to ask the question. This isn't just related to this, but just in general, I think don't accept what you're hearing. If you want to know more about literacy and AAC, just ask the question. And as a speech language pathologist, the thing I always preach is stay in your lane. Yeah, right. So if it was about dysphagia or voice therapy or voice cancer, I'm not going to answer that, right? Like I'm going to refer out. And I always joke, but I'm very serious when I say that. So like me as whatever the school SLP, let's pretend, somewhere, if I don't feel comfortable answering that parent coming to me and saying, hey, like, but when's Johnny going to learn, all of his ABCs and his phonics and all his the things that his peers are learning. If you don't know that answer, just say, I'm going to go try to find that for you. And so I think us just kind of having that onus as a profession, because it's ultimately just about helping, right? So like, even though I might not have the answer, there's somebody who does. So we have such a great network of other SLPs. Like it's great, especially with social media these days.
Yeah.
Just go ask, and phone a friend, because there's tons of people who can help you.
Yeah. I think that's awesome advice. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know definitely parents learned a lot, and I think you gave some awesome advice to SLPs. And I even learned a lot today. And thank you for sharing Charlie's story, because that is, like I said, incredibly inspiring and just so awesome to hear.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks to the audience for listening. And don't forget to give us a little rate, review, and make sure to subscribe so you know when we have new episodes out. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.